Well, hello everyone, and welcome once again to the Open Mic, Writers in Their Own Words, where every show I talk to writers about their work, about the publishing industry, and how they do what they do. The show is available by the same name on both YouTube and via all of the major podcast platforms, so you can subscribe to either or to both, which of course is my preference, so that you never miss a thing. So, Writers in Their Own Words. That is definitely the name of the show, and regular visitors know that my focal point is talking to authors, and predominantly crime fiction and thriller authors. But I have a very different show for you today, focused instead on music. Yes, music, and specifically the art and craft of being a radio personality, what we used to call a DJ back in the day, the dinosaur era when I was young. In modern radio, though, it's radio personalities. So in that regard, my guest today has been one of the most well-known and really beloved classic rock radio personalities in the Northern California area and now beyond, thank you, Internet, for many, many decades. He recently returned to the morning drive slot at KSEG The Eagle for the first time in years. So I thought it would be good to have him come on to talk about music and radio, and perhaps to get him to share some stories from his long career dealing with rock stars. He's a legend around these parts here, as I said, here in the Northern California area, and I'm also proud to call him a friend. Please welcome Justin Case to the Open Mic. Justin, how are you doing today?
Doing excellent, Rich. I appreciate it's quite the introduction.
Oh, you earned it, man. Every bit of it. Like I say, you know, you and me, we have really probably only one real thing in common. We're both old.
Right.
We're both better.
We have dogs.
Decades.
Dogs. The love for dogs and wiffle ball.
Right? That's true. Dogs, wiffle ball,
and music.
And music, absolutely. Well, and we have a woman in common, but of course, your wife, my friend, who I've also been blessed to know for a long, long time. Your dear wife, Marianne. I know you've talked about her more than a few times on the air. I'm not kidding, folks. When I say Justin's a friend, I'm really thrilled. We've actually, I kind of had this the tangential kind of relationship for a very long time, but we keep running into each other and finding out all these commonalities. So. It's been really fun of late to get to hear you back on the radio. It's been really fun listening to the Eagle again, which is great. And we're going to get into all that here in just a second because, as I noted, you're now back doing the morning drive slot, KSEG 96.9 The Eagle in Sacramento, which if you don't know, like I say, I mentioned that thing called the Internet. This day and age, you don't have to be driving around in your car in Sacramento to get that station. You can get it online, and Justin will tell us a little bit about the app and how you do that. But I'm just really interested, man. You've been back now for a little while. How does it feel? You're back running the show in the morning drive slot, man.
Yeah, no, it feels great. I'll tell you what, though, it's dark at 4:00 in the morning. I don't have to tell you that. But no, it feels really good to be back on the morning. And it's the Odyssey app is where you can listen online. You can download it for free. It's a free app if you're not in the area. But it feels good. I was doing afternoon drive 3 to 7 for the last couple of years, so it takes a little getting used to. But I've done mornings before. I'm a morning person, so I think it's a great fit, and I really appreciate the folks at Odyssey Sacramento, Stacy Kaufman, Aaron Roberts, and Vince Richards for believing in me and putting me in that position. I think we're heading in the right direction. I hope.
Well, and you mentioned you're doing the afternoons, and of course you've been all over the slots. Which anyone who's been in radio for a long time, you're gonna do a little bit of everything, and we'll talk about some of that too. But what's the big difference between doing the afternoon drive time and the morning drive time?
Not a lot. I mean, you're kind of catering to those people that are either getting up and going to work or people who are getting off work and driving home. So pretty much the same. just the time slot really is the difference. Those two slots on radio are primarily the premier slots as far as a full-time job goes. So I was so blessed to be able to get a full-time job. I've been with the Eagle this time since 2017, and I was working part-time, doing evenings and weekends. And radio has changed so much. I know we're going to get into that as well, but one of the things is like getting a full-time job in radio is it's tougher and tougher every day. So I feel blessed to be able to do what I'm doing right now.
Right. Well, and I know you stepped away from doing radio for a little bit, and then eventually came back. What was the allure that got you back into this crazy ass business?
Well, I was always dabbling part-time. Actually worked over at KFBK for a few years, reading news on the weekend. I wanted to do that. Just a kind of a feather in the cap kind of thing. And then there's other things that I was doing at the time. And like we talked about Mary Ann, thank God for her, because she let me kind of pursue my dream and my passion, which is radio, and, working part-time here and working other part-time jobs. But it just, once it gets in your blood, Rich, it doesn't leave. And I tell you, it started early. My brother and I had a transistor radio that my mom had given us, and I'm talking back in Chicago. My brother and I shared a room very young, and we'd listen to WCFL, WLS, Larry Lujak, some of the great jocks back there, a lot of rhythm and blues music. And I was just blown away that this little transistor radio, we could pull things in when we were supposed to be long asleep, in our room. And it was just, there was something about it really magical, and that it's always stuck with me. So.
Yeah, well, that is true about a lot of things in the creative world. They did these. There's something about it, and I do consider what you do to be creative, because it we know for years and years and years the industry has been going through various changes. It seems like all the time, and you've been into it a long time, and I want to talk a little bit about the personality-driven aspect of it in a bit, but right now, just, from what year did you get started doing this? And maybe what are some of the biggest changes you've seen since that time?
Well, I went to Sac State, Stingers up, and graduated 86, and I got right into radio. It was 93 Rock at the time, and I got hired on as doing promotions, helping out the promotions department. So I was just driving the 93 Rock van around, dropping off stickers at all the 7-Elevens throughout town, and coming back and typing up a sheet that I'd put on the dashboard in the studio so the jocks could read, hey, pick up your 93 Rock sticker at the corner of Greenback and Sunrise, or whatever it was. And once I was in that building, I didn't leave. And so it just kind of morphed into things. I got a weekend shift. There was a change in the program director, and there was an interim PD, and he was looking for people to put on the air. And I'm like, I'll do it. So he threw me on the air, and then the PD came in, saw my name on the the schedule, the weekend schedule, and just kind of assumed I was a jock. So, and it morphed into the overnights. And that's something that has changed. They don't have an overnight jock anymore. A lot of automation happens on radio. And so that was kind of where you could really hone your craft, was, on the overnights, because really no one's listening. There's people working the third shift, stocking shelves. And, so it was kind of a cool little niche, but it's kind of where you hone your craft. And then it just turned into like the mornings, because I would be there in the morning when Kevin Boom Boom Anderson would come in. And it was like, I was just like, oh, there he is. That's Kevin, and he'd ask me to do something, and I was just Johnny on the spot for him. And it really just being lucky and being in the right place at the right time, and a lot of hard work, no doubt. So.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned Boom Boom Anderson. Okay. Because I wanted to talk about personalities, because here's the thing we know: for the longest time in radio, it was really, especially in FM radio, But and that's not even fair. Really, even going back to the very beginnings of AM radio and the rock industry in the 50s was very driven by personalities, from Alan Freed to Wolfman Jack, to some of the names a lot of people know. But every station, every market was really driven by personalities. Now, here in our area, I remember Marlin in the morning on KSFM 102 out of Woodland, to show you how old I am. With Kevin Anderson and all of the great radio personalities at what was then KZAP, then 93 Rock, etc. Kevin Boom Boom Anderson was definitely one of the more notable ones from that era. You know, I'm trying to think about this here a little bit. I mean, because there was a reliance on you guys to make or break records, right? The companies would call you and try to talk you into playing this music, play this new record, play this, all that kind of thing. And I don't think that happens anymore. Tell me a little bit about that personality-driven era and maybe how it is or isn't different today.
Yeah, the personality, I think you still have to have a personality to be on the radio. I think just being able to connect with people is important, especially locally, which again, automation kind of takes away from that, because someone could be in Des Moines, Iowa, sending voice tracks to your station and you really wouldn't know that person isn't in Sacramento. So just the local thing, but breaking records, again, I'm on classic rock, so a lot of the we don't really play any new stuff. I know the Rolling Stones just came out with a new album, but we don't play any of that. We just really highlight the classic rock songs that we are known for. But other stations, like in our Odyssey complex, Alt 94.7, they're playing new music all the time, and they're breaking records and just keeping their finger on the pulse of things. But to get back to it, like in '89, when I was working at 98 Rock, and I mean, there were some albums like Aerosmith had Pump come out, and and there was songs on that, that you would see, and it's like, okay, we're gonna play this, and we'd have little music tests with the music director and the program director and just all the jocks, and we'd listen to music and go, yeah, that could be a hit there. Let's play that. And then, of course, there was always suggestions from the record company. They'd say, hey, tracks 1, track 7, these are the ones we're pushing. But with it, yeah, right. But with that, would come promotional things. They'd kind of grease the sled. Would say, hey, we can do a meet and greet if you're playing these records with the band. We can get you maybe a flyway trip with, to go somewhere exotic to see the band play. Never really got to see the end of, that whole thing. That's kind of the payola plugola thing that we all try to stay away from. But yeah, it's different for us at the classic rock station, because we're just playing the classic hits, which I still love. I really do.
Mm-hmm. Well, I noted, we're about the same age, which means, we grew up with so many of the bands that now make up classic rock radio. They were just the popular bands of the day, Zeppelin and Aerosmith and Bad Company and on and on and on, right?
Yeah.
Music's changed so much, so many things have come into play that were not in play when I was a kid, rap and hip hop and the kind of alt country and all these things that are huge in this day and age. But classic rock and those songs are still as popular today, it feels like, as they ever were. What makes classic rock so enduring? Why has it still got such a hold on that listening audience, you think?
That is a great question, Rich. I think for me, the music, listening to it, it's so well crafted compared to what you hear today on the radio. A lot of time and effort went into writing. People actually playing instruments. That was a novel idea, right? Being able to sing, not auto-tuned, not having a drum machine take care of your drums, and just the whole analog, recording things on tape and using a mixing board and mixing it live on a mixing board in a studio. all those things have, you go back to the artistry of it all, it's an art form that I hope it's not lost. I know there's probably a small niche of people who are still recording that way and doing things that way. But I think the music today, and I want to sound like an old, the music today, you kids, it's just not as memorable, and it just doesn't have the depth that can really reach you. And for me, I think music has a timestamp. I can't even remember what I had for dinner last night, but I can remember like exactly where I was when I first heard Peter Frampton's Come Alive album, or what that summer was like listening to that album over and over again. Cheap Trick, Live at Budokan. I mean, all those songs and records have a timestamp, and it brings me back to maybe a comfortable time in my life, a carefree time. And I think that's why classic rock is what it is. It's almost like a home cooked meal.
Right. And I really absolutely 100% agree on the whole singing thing. I mean, you never had any question that Paul Rodgers was the one singing,
right?
Or that Robert Plant or Steven Tyler or, fill in the blank. I mean, there was no question Joe Perry was the one playing that guitar, or, Jimi Hendrix was playing that guitar. And, and I think that is one of the things that is lost in this day and age is, you don't, so many of, especially we went through this era of them breaking all of the boy bands or the Britney Spears, Christina Aguilera. Now, look, and I know some of them can actually sing, but the way that maybe they, how do I say this without pissing off everybody that I know of a younger generation? But I mean, look, we don't need Mariah Carey carrying out a note for a minute and a half, right, to show you. I know you can sing,
right.
The beauty of a Paul Rodgers or a Jackson Brown, or I've tried to sing a little bit of Jackson Brown. He is incredibly tough to replicate. For those of you who sing a little bit, he's incredibly tough to replicate. He's right at that middle octave range that it's a lot harder to replicate than you think. So I always had such admiration for those people that could sing, and you knew listening to the records that it was them. Now, like you say, auto-tune among a million other technical tools. Yeah, maybe not so much. The other thing I wanted to ask you about too, you guys used to have a lot of leeway to do all the games and the gags and the novelty songs. When you were part of the Rise guys, I loved those novelty songs. In fact, we're on the Christmas season now, so I'm still hearing you guys sing pines everywhere, pines.
That ho ho, I'm Santa and I sit in the mall. Yeah.
I love that stuff. And so, what's the lay of the land, I guess, these days for doing things like that? Because I feel like, there was that whole morning zoo thing that came on later that's different than what you guys did. It was just more kind of crass and everything. You guys have seemed like you were always a lot more clever and really genuinely funny. What's the lay of the land for doing stuff like that these days?
Well, a lot of credit goes to Whitey Gleason. He's kind of the Rob Petrie of the whole writing aspect of things. He was certainly clever, as all three of us were, including Phantom. We were just having fun, and now I'm a one-man show, so I can't really get into that, having characters on so much, it's kind of hard to do that. But I mean, it was good. I've gone back and listened to some of the Rise Guys CDs that we would put out every year. We'd put them out, and it was I think we sold them for $5, and it was a benefit for a local charity. And I've gone back and listened to some of them. I was like, okay, well, probably couldn't use that on the air today.
Right.
And so now it's strange. I have this little guy that kind of jumps up on my shoulder when I'm talking on the air, and it's like, I probably can't say that. So I need to choose my words a little bit more carefully, which I think is good, but it also restricts me a little bit on what you can and can't say, because I'm always just trying to, go right down the middle and not, like you said, offend anybody. I don't want to offend anybody, because you lose listeners, and that's not the name of the game. but you try to, I try to be more clever, I think, with what I present on the air. And yeah, I wish we could do games and things, but it does take, it takes a few people in the studio to really pull it off. You know, like the Jollywood Cubes. That was a classic bit that we did. We all did voices. And if you remember the Hollywood Squares, it had, you know, all the celebrities, and the listener on the phone would call in and say, well, I want Sean Connery to, you know, to block or whatever. And then we'd have Phantom ask the question. He'd be the MC, and then Sean Connery would answer the question. And so, you know, those games, those were fun. And the parody songs were great fun. And it was fun to perform them live, too, when we had the Rise Guys band. That was always a good time.
I imagine, too, in this day and age, when, you know, let's be real, we're in a time when people get offended by pretty much everything all the time. I imagine management probably keeps a much tighter cap on that than they may be used to.
Yeah, no, they do. I've been called into the programmer's office a few times of people calling in and say, you know, and they always say, hey, did you say, were you alluding to something on the air, something about this? I'm like, yeah. And then I'll explain what I was saying. And they're like, okay, just don't stay away from that. And it's like, okay, so there are people listening, you know, I mean, and there are people that just want to complain and be offended. And there's always that button on your radio that you can change if you want. But again, I'm not in the business of offending people. I'm just kind of speaking, really trying to be truthful on who I am, because people identify with me, and they, you know, I can say something like, hey, walking the dogs and, you know, and trying to pick up poop when it's cold with a bag and stuff. It's not much fun. And people can relate to that because they too are walking their dogs and trying to get the bag on their hand and pick up the poop. And, you know, I mean, you know, stuff like that. So just relatable things. That's kind of where I'm at right now.
Probably safe, smart and safe. That's what.
Yeah. But hey, I tell you what, that warm poop in a bag makes a nice little handy hand warmer on a cold morning.
Yeah, absolutely. Being a dog person, I totally relate to that. So we talked, you alluded to it just briefly earlier about maybe some of the perks of the business, getting to go to the concerts. And,
yeah.
And I think that is one thing now. I mean, to me, concerts have become, first of all, who can afford to go to a concert anymore, right? When tickets are going for hundreds and hundreds of dollars, if not thousands sometimes. Of course, I'm old now and I have back issues, so I can't stand for 3 hours at a time anymore.
Right.
There's all these things that make you go, back in the day when I could go do this, it was so great.
Yeah.
But I think all of us remember the great concerts that we went to. I mean, I have very fond memories of Bob Seger's Making Thunderbirds tour in 1983, seeing him down in the Cow Palace, or the probably half dozen times I saw UFO places and things like that. What are, you know, for somebody like you, who for it was like a way of life, what were some of the more memorable events like that you recall from your career?
Before I get into that, I just saw that the average ticket price for 2023 was $252 a ticket. And I was talking about this on the air. I've got a ticket stub from 77. It was Day on the Green, number 4, I believe. Santana, Leonard Skinner, Peter Frampton, and the Outlaws. $6.50 on that ticket. That's like $1.63 a band if you break it down. So yeah, ticket prices are through the roof. And yeah, fortunately, back in the day, yeah, we would get comped tickets, so never even had to pay for tickets, which were great. But some of the greatest shows that I mean, there were so many of them, but I've got a few of them. Pink Floyd came to Hughes Stadium. It was April 20th, 1988. And if you remember that day, it rained all day. And then all of a sudden the clouds parted over Hughes Stadium. Pink Floyd comes on, Shine On You Crazy Diamond. And it was like, that was great. I mean, it was Roger Waters and David Gilmour. Whether or not they were speaking to each other at that time, I don't know. But man, that was a great show. I saw the Arms benefit. Do you remember that? It was in 83. It was a benefit for Ronnie Lane, Faces Small.
Oh, right.
And yeah, Kenny Jones was playing drums. Steve Winwood was there. But the highlight for me of that show was Eric Clapton, Jeff Beck, and my hero, Jimmy Page, on stage at the same time playing. And I remember that going, I mean, it was probably 20 years old, and I'm going, okay, you have to remember this because you're never going to see these three on stage ever again. And it was like, oh, that was a great show. Any Grateful Dead, I'm a huge Grateful Dead fan, but if, yeah, I know that's one of those polar things too. Either you love the Dead or you don't, but going to the shows at the old Cal Expo with Jerry Garcia, that was always good. I saw Stevie Ray Vaughan at the Warfield Theater, and that was back in 84. And then the Rolling Stones was another great show. 81, they came to Candlestick Park. That was the Tattoo You tour.
Oh, yeah.
And George Thorogood, Jay Giles Band opened up, and it was October 17th, 1981. And I mean, that was just a great show. It really was. But what was really interesting about that, 8 years later to the day, October 17th, 1989, I was there at Candlestick Park, Game 3 of the World Series, and that was the A's and the Giants, and that was the earthquake game. And I was there. I was like, wow, okay, pretty weird. But yeah, those are just a few of the shows. Man, I've been just blessed to see any and pretty much every band. There's a few bands though that I have never seen, which I kick myself. I never saw Queen live. That was one of them. Gosh, I know there's a few that I haven't seen that I'm kicking myself. I can't think of them right now, but
you don't know at the time. I mean, that's the thing. And, we all have busy lives and all those things. And then, I was thinking about, you're talking about a Day on the Green. I remember going to a Day on the Green in 78, and it was, I'm trying to remember, it was AC/DC, Aerosmith, Nugent, and I feel like Mahogany Rush.
Nice.
And that's the thing. If you were around long enough, you start to think, I remember Mahogany Rush. I mean,
yeah.
What are some of the bands like that maybe that because you were in the business, you remember maybe you even saw that nobody would even think of today?
Well, like, how about UFO? I mean, that's a great band.
They were my favorite. That was my favorite band. I like I said, I think I saw them about 6 times. Joe Log and Michael Schenker and Pete Way, and oh God, I absolutely loved that band. Yeah.
Triumph is another band that doesn't get a lot of airplay that is great. Man, but I don't know. There's like Rush is a great band. I saw them live a few times. I know that's a really well-known band. But some of the more obscure shows that you would see in some of the clubs. Oh man, I saw Charles Musselwhite at Sac State one time. I mean, little shows like that.
Yeah,
it's just I really don't like to pigeonhole myself either into rock or anything else. James Taylor puts on a fantastic show. Marianne and I saw him at the Golden One Center a few years back, and still just great musician, great storyteller, and a fun show.
Yeah, I mentioned I saw the Bob Seger tour in 1983. He had John Hall, formerly of Orleans, if you're old enough to remember Orleans, and still the one.
Yeah.
And he was past that. It was just the John Hall band. Just blew us away. The opening band, we were mostly just thinking, you just bide your time until Seeger comes out. John Hall was fantastic, and had first time I've ever in my life seen a rock and roll trombonist, right?
Yeah,
just really, really fabulous stuff, and it gave me an appreciation then that I think I've held on to the rest of my life, and I think you'll be able to relate to this. If you keep an open mind, especially about music, hopefully in all parts of your life, but especially music. It's one of the things that I loved. Again, as a kid growing up in the late 60s, early 70s, one of the things that I do remember is radio was a lot more eclectic. You could have a station that would play a broader mix of, rock, R&B, maybe some soul, things that, especially in the early 70s, as the music was slanting toward country rock, you would really get this wide array of things. And then, of course, it's been siloed a lot more now. But if you keep your mind open, even as it is getting siloed in outer world, if you keep your mind open, there's a lot of great stuff out there that can move you if you're just willing to let it,
Yep.
And that's the thing I think makes music so unique. Music can bring people together of the most disparate backgrounds.
No, absolutely. And it's just, it's like food, food is that same way. You can come from different parts of the world, but you all need to sit at the table and eat, and you can together. It brings you together. And absolutely, music is that way too. Especially, when you're going to see a band that everyone else is into and you're all there experiencing the same thing. It is kind of magical. And
it really is.
Yeah.
Well,
I love it, man. It's just fun.
What probably isn't always so magical in your career was dealing with some of the personalities that make up bands, because if you know anything at all about music, creativity, man, the history of rock is funny to me. I really do pay attention a lot to backstory, and I love to hear about things. And one of the most consistent themes in the history of music is, band gets together, band gets some success, band learns to hate each other, band breaks up, right? This is the plot of every behind the music that ever existed, right? Because it's true. So I'm just curious, I'm sure got to spend a lot of time getting to know some of these guys a little bit. Who were some of the best? And if you can share some of the more challenging personalities and encounters you've had.
Well, it was always cool when the artists would drop by the radio station. That was always fun. I remember the old 93 Rock, Ozzy came by. But one of the great ones, Gene Simmons from Kiss, came by the old 93 Rock studios, and we were out front. We had a big 93 Rock painted on the wall, and that's where we all stood and, had our pictures taken. And then it was time for him to go down the hallway, and I think Charlie Thomas might have been on the air at that time. It was the afternoon drive. And so we're walking down the hallway, and I'm walking next to Gene Simmons, and Gene turns to me and he says, "So, Justin, what do you do here at the station?" And I'm like, Gene Simmons just said my name. He remembered who I was. I mean, what a brilliant guy he is. I mean, it's just kind of part of marketing that he does, and knows how to work it, and used my name. And that was hearing him say my name, I thought, man, that is really cool. And at that time, I think I was probably just working weekends, and maybe in promotion. So I wasn't even on the air that much. Greg Allman also, I remember he played the old Cal Expo, and after the show, we were backstage, and I was with Mary Ann and my brother, and we actually sat around in a little circle. It was Greg and his girlfriend, my brother, Mary Ann, myself, and maybe one other person. We're all drinking a beer off the keg that was back there, just kind of shooting the breeze like we were all buddies. Really, really nice guy. I love the Allman Brothers. Oh my gosh. That's Live at the Fillmore East. And we could talk about great albums. It's hands down the 71 Fillmore East. But on the other end of the spectrum, I got to mention it pains me. Eddie Van Halen. Now when I had an older brother who turned me on to, Rolling Stones, Allman Brothers, all those, Beatles, here's all this, you can listen to this. But I had a friend growing up, and I'd go over to his house. He had a great stereo, and he goes, Justin, you got to come over right now. So I rode my bike over there, and he had just picked up Van Halen's first album, and he puts it on and drops the needle on the record, and that, that horn that starts out, Running with the Devil. And I mean, my jaw dropped at that point. And I was like, okay, my brother has his music and stuff. This is going to be our music. And it really was. That was one of the first cassettes that I had in my car after I turned 16 that I would just play over and over again. Just that whole first album from Van Halen. Great, great album. But so anyway, I'm a huge Van Halen fan. I went to all the concerts, bought all the records, had all the gear, the shirts and everything. And I finally have an opportunity to meet Eddie Van Halen. And I had it was the Marin Vets Auditorium in Santa Fe. I think they were there in 78, maybe 79. And I had one of those Instamatic cameras, the 110 Instamatic. Mm-hmm. And I put it up there, clicked a photo, and took it down to the drugstore, where you get the film developed and wait and hope to see it came out great. And it was a decent photo. Anyway, I had it blown up and I had it on my wall for years. And I'm thinking, okay, here's my opportunity. I'm going to meet Eddie Van Halen. So I pulled it out of the frame. I put it on a clipboard. I bought a brand new Sharpie pen, a silver one. And I'm there. I've got it in my backpack. And all of a sudden, here's Eddie. And I'm like, I pull it out. I hand him everything. I go, hey, can you sign this for me? Huge fan. And at that point, he goes, I can't sign it, man. And management came in and said, nope, Eddie can't sign it. And I'm like, what do you mean he can't sign it? I'm like, I'm his #1 fan, dude. I'm just like, I've been there. I've been there for you, Eddie. I can't sign it. And so the next morning I got on the air and I just started really bagging on him, just going, man, that's kind of messed up. And so much so that the local Warner Brothers rep called the station and said, hey, tell Justin to knock it off. He's, I was like, well, hey, I'm just telling the truth. He wouldn't sign it. And then they came back through, I think it was the Balance tour they were on. They came back through 9 months later and he signed it, but the bloom was off the rose at that point. And I still have it. It's over here somewhere. But
big leaguing you, man. He was big leaguing you. Why?
I know. And I at that point, I can understand opening up the floodgates maybe for autographs or something, but really it was the radio station and a few listeners back there. And it wasn't the thing too, Rich, it wasn't like I was going, how sometimes like, oh, dude, can I get your autograph? Here's a wet cocktail napkin. Do you have a pen? It wasn't even that. I had it on a clipboard. It was ready to sign, a brand new Sharpie. All he had to do was put pen to paper.
Yeah. Yeah, that's not cool, man.
Yeah. I was sad, though, that he passed away, obviously. That guy, you talk about, I dabble a little bit in guitar, and what that guy could do with a fretboard and an amplifier, just absolutely amazing. So,
yeah, he was one of a kind for sure.
Yeah.
Well, I'm glad he did eventually sign it, though. You're really quick. You mentioned the Allman Brothers. I only have one small, very tangential, nothing anywhere near as cool as that connection to them. But Dwayne Allman's daughter, Galadriel, lives in Northern California, or did. I haven't spoken to her in years, but when I first started doing this, before it was on video, it was just a blog. I interviewed her because she had just done a book about her father. And it's a really interesting book because she really never got to know him. He died when she was just an infant, but it was more the story of her search and all the research she did to try to learn something about her father. And, her name is Galadriel. That should tell you a little bit of what her, where her parents' minds were when she was born and that kind of a thing. But I remember we did it up at this resort in Lake Tahoe that a friend of mine had a thing up at Camp Sacramento, somewhere in that area, and to where this event was. And she said, you should come up. You can do the interview here. Okay, great. And I walked into this little convenience market beforehand to get a coffee or something. And I looked over and I had never met her, never even seen a picture. I looked over and said, that's her. Because she looks so much like Dwayne. It was not even funny. It was so easy to, so of course when we got introduced, I said, yeah, I was right behind you in the mini mart. But anyway, that's a very tangential thing. But
yeah. And Frank Hannon, guitar player for Tesla, and he's off on his own doing stuff as well. His father-in-law is Dickie Betts.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. How cool is that, right?
I did.
And you're sitting around and go, hey, how's that riff in Blue Sky? Can you break that down for me?
Yeah.
Father-in-law.
Wow. Now that is really, really cool. That's a connection that would be really, really cool to have. Yeah. I grew up with The Road Goes On Forever and Eat a Peach and all of that stuff. That's I still every now and then love to go back and listen to the recording he did with when Wilson Pickett covered Hey Jude.
Okay.
Dwayne was maybe the greatest session guitar player ever. And that's,
Yes.
if you forget the man was 23,
Right.
He was just such a kid.
Well, the end of Layla, that's him mauling that slide guitar.
Yeah.
Incredible.
Yeah, just they're such a privilege to be around and to hear these guys. I mean, that's the thing I always take away from all this. God, what a privilege to be
Right.
have been around when that was fresh, that kind of a thing.
Yeah.
I only really have one more serious question for you, which is, what's the one thing you wish you could change, maybe about the music business? Not necessarily the radio business, but maybe that too. But you've been around a long time. You've been able to see all of these things, all this evolution of stuff. Was there something you go, God, I really wish I could maneuver that a little bit?
I mean, I don't know if this qualifies, but just the perception of that radio is dead. I don't believe that one bit. Radio is as alive as it ever has been. And it really, I think it's more focused now than it ever has been. So if I could debunk that perception that it's dead, that would be one thing. And automation, I know it's kind of, it's a necessity in some cases for cost cut, measures and things like that. But just the fact that in the old days, you could hear somebody at 2:00 in the morning and you knew that person was in a studio somewhere talking to you and they were up just like you were. And that to me always was kind of really cool. You wake up in the middle of the night, you got the radio on, you hear someone talking. It's like, that person's awake too. Nowadays, you could be listening any day part and hear a jock talking, and it's like, not only are they not in your town, they could have recorded that, 2 days ago or something. So automation, like I said, I know it's a cost-cutting measure that a lot of stations employ, but just the localness too that you get when you actually have a live jock on the air. I just think that's so important. The community too. I mean, we're able to do good things in the community. Toy drives, food drives, things like that. Just get things together. So you don't really get that from automation and syndication.
Right. Yeah. What that makes me think of when you say it is watching, like a Play Misty for Me or Warriors or, these movies where the interaction between a radio personality and a fan or the community was so much a driver of the story.
Yes.
We as teenagers, of course, we're all going to see the Warriors and ourselves.
What a great movie. That's a great reference, Rich. Yeah.
Well, that's a great movie, but exactly. But it was the radio personality was the one directing all the bangers every direction and giving them up to the minute thing on what was going on out there. And it's like, couldn't do that if that was on an automated cart now, could you? Right?
Right.
That whole movie theme was shot to hell right there, right? Well, I always like to end on something that I think is fun. I mean it for it to be fun. If anyone's a regular listener to the show, they know I do this all the time, and I try to have something, a little bit of a theme here, but I'm probably obvious one. This one, let's just say I have the superpower. I can put you together for whatever, dinner, drinks, a long chat, bike ride, whatever you want, with any one of the following three people. Which one of these three would you choose and why?
Okay.
The options I'm going to give you are the great Alan Freed. Well, great depending on what Alan Freed, the famous Alan Freed, the late great Otis Redding, or Janis Joplin. One of those three I could put you together with for a conversation of any kind that you want. Who would you choose?
Wow. Janis seems like that would be dangerous. I don't know if I could keep up with her at this point. Otis Redding would be very interesting, but I think I got to go with Larry Freed just because of the DJ whole aspect of it. I just would be so curious to find out what it was like doing radio, top 40 radio, and that, back then, after a 4-hour shift, the shifts were only 4 hours. People go, oh, you got such an easy job. But back then, and when I first started, like 86 and everything, you're loading up everything. You're loading up the carts, which were commercials, only a minute long or 30 seconds. You're loading up the music. You're firing off the board. It was really hands-on. And I always stood up because you got to keep that energy going. After 4 hours, you're sweating. And I could imagine top 40 too, when you have a Beatles song that the longest song was really 2 minutes long. I mean, that was the beauty of classic rock, is like you could put on Freebird and all of a sudden you got 9 minutes. You could go down the hallway, grab a cup of coffee, maybe stop off at the bathroom, say hi to a couple of people, and still come back before the record was over. But yeah, back when Alan was spinning discs, man, what, 2-3 minutes were the length of the songs, man, and you are flying. So I think, to me, I would really love to pick his brain and just see exactly what it was like back then in just the glory days of radio. Really, that was the golden age of it.
Being out there right on the cutting edge, absolutely. And me being the journalist, I would probably want to know. So tell me more about the payola, number one.
Right. Tell
me how you managed to get yourself a songwriting credit on like 1,000 songs when you don't do music. How did that work out? But that's me. I'd be wanting to know. I would be digging at stuff. But anyway, just in case, thank you so much for coming on the show. I'm going to ask you one more time, remind people about the Audacity app.
Yes. It's a free Odyssey app. You can just, download it anywhere from your little Play Store or the store on your app there on your phone. And you can listen free anywhere, odyssey.com.
Well, I encourage everybody to do that. If you haven't done it, or if you're at your computer a lot like I am, you can also listen online, KSEG 96.9 The Eagle. You're on 6 to 10, correct? AM?
Yes. 6 a.m., 10 a.m. Monday through Friday. And for the time being, I'm doing a Saturday shift.
Oh, wow. They're getting their money's worth out of Justin now. They've decided, we're just going to have him on the air 24/7 and, forget all the pre-recorded. No, kidding, of course. Good. Justin, it's really great to hear you back on the radio in the morning. That's definitely my jam too. I love hearing you on my car radio in the morning when I'm running my dogs out to the hinterlands to go walking and stuff. It's always really good. I highly recommend to folks, if you are interested at all in classic rock and you're in your cars in the morning or wherever you're doing, turn on the radio and listen to Justin. It's a good listen. So thanks for coming on, man. I really appreciate it. I'm going to offer the same commercial that I have to offer everybody all the time, which is, if you haven't hit subscribe, please do that. And whether you're on YouTube or whether you're on listening to the podcast, please hit subscribe. If you'd be so kind, leave a nice review. 5 stars is always preferable. And the reason is, it really does help other people find the show. And for, my purposes, I ain't doing this to make money, folks, but I am doing it so that hopefully the folks who are gracious enough to come on get a nice big audience and hear about what's going on in their lives, whether they're authors like normally on this show or just, somebody who is in the music world like Justin. I love this. This is a nice little holiday special. Maybe this is my own kind of holiday. Not Charlie Brown, even though I'm bald. This is my own Charlie Brown special. So anyway, Justin, thank you so much for coming on. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Rich. I appreciate you very much for having me on. That is very cool. Thank you.
Absolutely. Well, I'm going to leave you all with the same thing that I always leave you with. And I mean it more than ever. I recently lost a really good friend very unexpectedly. And I've been saying this a lot longer than that, but tomorrow is not promised to any of us. So please, whatever your jam, whatever you do, make today count. Okay? All right. Until next time, this has been for my guest, just in case, for myself, Rich Eisen. This has been The Open Mic. We'll see you next time. Take care.